The woman I was courting made me compete with another man for her attention and called me her backup plan. I became the man she could never get back. I met Camille at my cousin Bentley's barbecue last summer. She was standing by the cooler in a yellow sundress, and I asked for her number before I even knew her last name. She gave it to me, but said she wasn't easy to pin down. I thought she was being playful. I didn't know that was a warning. The first month was fine. Dinner twice, a walk around the park, a movie I don't remember the name of because she spent half of it on her phone. Then she started mentioning Benny. Benny from her office. Benny who brought her coffee every morning. Benny who left little notes on her desk. Benny who had courtside seats from his company. She brought him up out of nowhere, in the middle of conversations that had nothing to do with him. I'd be telling her about my week and she would say, "Oh, that reminds me. Benny said the funniest thing today." I asked her once if something was happening between them and she laughed and said, "I don't know yet. Depends on who steps up." That should have been my first sign. I stayed. I'm not a quitter. So I stepped up. I started picking her up from work even though she lived 40 minutes the wrong direction from my apartment. I took her to restaurants where the menu didn't have prices and the waiter folded the napkin into the shape of a bird. I bought her flowers every single Friday from a florist on the corner of 9th and Burnside that charged $18 for a small bouquet and $26 for a medium. She'd accept the flowers, smile, kiss me on the cheek, and then casually mention that Benny had invited her to some rooftop bar downtown that Friday night. There was a weekend trip I planned for her birthday weekend, a cabin 2 hours north with a hot tub on the back deck and a stocked fridge. I had it booked 4 months in advance. She told me 3 days before the trip that she couldn't go because Benny was throwing a work thing, and it would look weird if she wasn't there. I lost the deposit. The cabin sat empty. She sent me a picture from the work thing at 1 in the morning, just her and a wine glass. No Benny in the frame at all. I asked her why she sent it. She said she wanted me to see what I was missing. One night I showed up at her place with takeout from her favorite Thai spot. 2 bags, still warm. She opened the door 6 inches and told me she couldn't hang out because Benny wanted drinks after work. She said it standing in the doorway while I held both bags in front of her like an offering. She didn't even take the food. She didn't invite me inside. She just said sorry and closed the door. I drove home with the takeout cooling on the passenger seat and ate both portions on my couch in front of a TV I didn't turn on. A week later, I was at a small party at Bentley's place. Camille was there, but she was across the room talking to people I didn't know. Lita, her best friend since high school, walked up to me near the back porch and asked if I had a minute. We stepped outside. Lita said she felt bad telling me this. She said she had thought about it for 2 days. She told me that Camille had been calling me her backup plan to their whole friend group. Camille said Benny was the real prize, and I was there to keep her company until Benny committed. Lita said Camille had said it twice in the last month, once at brunch in front of 3 other girls, and once on a phone call where Lita had asked her point blank what she was doing with me. I asked Lita to say it again exactly the way Camille said it. She did, word for word. I confronted Camille that same night in her car after the party. She didn't deny it. She turned it around on me. She said if I was really serious about her, I wouldn't be threatened by a little competition. She said her mother had always told her that a woman should never settle for a man who isn't willing to fight for her. So I kept fighting. I planned her birthday dinner at an Italian restaurant she had been wanting to try for months, a place called Vincenti's that took reservations 3 weeks out. I booked a table for 10 because she wanted her closest friends there. I put down my credit card for a $400 deposit. I ordered a custom cake from a bakery across town for another $90. I bought her a gold bracelet she had pointed at through a store window on a date 6 weeks earlier, the kind of bracelet she didn't think I noticed her noticing. $620. The morning of the dinner, she called me at 10 in the morning while I was picking up the cake and told me she had invited Benny. No hesitation in her voice, no warning. I asked her why, and she said because he's important to me, and if you can't handle that, then maybe you're not the one. I almost canceled everything right there in the bakery parking lot with a box of fondant on the passenger seat, but the deposit was non-refundable. Her friends were already on their way, so I swallowed it. I showed up an hour early to make sure the table was right, the wine was open, the cake was in the back room waiting on its cue. Her friends arrived first. Then Camille walked in wearing a red dress and immediately started looking around the room. "Where's Benny?" she asked before she said hello to me. "He's not here yet," I said. She pulled out her phone and started texting him under the table. 20 minutes later, Benny walked in with a woman holding his hand. Camille's face went completely blank in a way I had never seen her face go blank. Benny smiled and said, "Hey everyone, this is my fiancée Ada. We just got engaged last month." Everyone at the table started congratulating them. Everyone except Camille. She just stared. Ada was warm and immediately started talking with Camille's friends. Then Ada turned to Camille and said, "Oh, you must be the one from Benny's office. He says you're always so nice to him." Camille managed a tiny nod. One of Camille's friends, Rosie, looked at Camille and said, "Wait, I thought you said Benny was trying to date you." Rosie didn't say it to be mean. She was genuinely confused because that was what Camille had told every single one of them. Benny heard it and looked uncomfortable. He said, "I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I've been with Ada for 3 years. I don't know where that came from." He wasn't rude about it. He looked confused. Ada looked confused too. Ada said something quiet to Benny, something I couldn't hear, and Benny shook his head. Then Rosie looked at me. She looked at me, and I watched her put the whole thing together in real time. Another one of Camille's friends, a girl named Joelle who I had only met twice, leaned across the table and asked Camille quietly if she was okay. Camille didn't answer. Joelle pulled back and looked at Rosie. Rosie looked at Joelle. Something passed between them without either of them saying a word, because now every story Camille had ever told about Benny chasing her was falling apart right there at the dinner table. Every time she told me to try harder. Every time she canceled on me for him. Every time she made me feel like I wasn't enough. It was all based on something that was never real. I stood up, I pulled out my wallet, I dropped enough cash on the table to cover my share and nothing else. The gold bracelet box was still in my jacket pocket. I took it with me. Camille spoke as I reached the door. "Where are you going?" she said. Her voice cracked on every word. I looked back once. Every person at that table was staring at her. The custom cake hadn't even come out from the back yet. My name was on the reservation. My card was on the deposit. And every person sitting there now knew the truth without me having to say one word. I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my car for about 10 minutes before I turned the engine on. My phone buzzed 6 times in those 10 minutes. All Camille. I watched the screen screen light up and go dark and light up again. I didn't pick it up. I drove home in silence. I turned my phone off before I got out of the car. The next morning, I turned it back on and watched the notifications load for almost a full minute. 23 missed calls, 41 text messages. The first ones were soft. Please, can we talk? I just need to hear your voice. Then they shifted. You really embarrassed me in front of my friends. After everything I did for you, you just walk out? I read that last one twice. I tried to think of a single thing Camille had ever done for me. One dinner she planned, one drive she made, one gift she bought. I couldn't come up with anything. Not one thing. I didn't respond. I put the phone face down on the dining table and went to make coffee. That afternoon, Bentley called. He said Camille had called him crying at 7 in the morning, asking him to talk to me. I told Bentley the whole story from the beginning. The mentions of Benny, the closed door with the takeout, the backup plan comment through Lita, the mother's advice line, the morning of phone call, Benny walking in with Ada. Bentley went quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm sorry I introduced you to her. I had no idea. I told him it wasn't his fault. He had met Camille through a friend of a friend. He didn't know. That night, Camille sent another text. Lita twisted my words. I never said any of that. You know she's been jealous of me for years. She was throwing her own best friend under the bus to save face. I screenshotted it and forwarded it to Lita with no message. Lita responded in under a minute. She said it word for word. I have receipts in the group chat. I'm not taking the fall for her. Then Lita sent a second message. She's been calling everyone tonight trying to find someone to go to bat for her. Rosie already told her no. My best friend Tylerson came over that evening with food and 2 sodas without me asking. He sat down at my dining table, scrolled through every text on my phone, and didn't say a word until he was done. His face got more and more still as he read. When he finished, he set the phone down on the counter and looked at me and said, block her. Tonight. You don't owe her a conversation. I sat back in my chair. He was right. I knew he was right. But there was a part of me that wanted Camille to hear it from me. Not through Lita. Not through Bentley. From me. Tylerson saw that on my face. He leaned forward and said, she already knows. She just doesn't want to admit it. I didn't block her. Not yet. 3 days later, Bentley called me back. His voice was tight. He said Camille had shown up at his place the afternoon before, when she knew he wasn't home. She sat on his couch and spent almost an hour telling his girlfriend that I had led her on for months and humiliated her at her own birthday party. His girlfriend had felt sorry for her. I drove over that night in my gym clothes. Bentley's girlfriend was sitting on the couch when I walked in, and she looked up at me, and her face said she didn't know whose version to believe. I sat across from her on the coffee table and said, can I tell you what actually happened from the beginning? She nodded. I told her about Benny. I told her about the closed door with the takeout. I told her about Lita and the backup plan comment. I told her about the morning of phone call and the dinner and Ada and the 3-year engagement. Then I pulled out my phone and showed her every screenshot. The soft messages, the angry ones, the guilt trips, the one where Camille said Lita twisted her words, Lita's response saying word for word, Lita's follow-up about the calls to everyone. Bentley's girlfriend read every single message slowly. When she was done, she put my phone down on the coffee table and said, she didn't mention any of that. She didn't mention Benny had a fiance. She didn't mention the dinner had 10 people at it. She told me you yelled at her in front of everyone. I told her I never raised my voice. I told her I dropped cash on the table and walked out. I told her I have the credit card receipt with a timestamp. She apologized to me. I told her she didn't need to. The next morning I called Lita, not a text, an actual phone call. I asked her if she would be willing to say what she told me in front of other people if it ever came to that. Lita didn't even pause. She said, I've been waiting for someone to ask me that. I'll say it to her face. Then I asked Lita for Rosie's number. I called Rosie that afternoon. Rosie said Camille hadn't spoken to her since the dinner. Camille had blocked her for asking the question at the table. Rosie said Camille had told all of their mutual friends the same story about Benny pursuing her for months, the same details, the same timeline. It wasn't a slip. It was a pattern. Rosie said she felt stupid for not catching it sooner. I told her she shouldn't. Camille didn't give anyone a reason to question it. 2 days after that, I was at work eating a sandwich at my desk on lunch break. My phone buzzed. Camille. The message said, if you don't call me back by tomorrow, I'm going to tell Bentley's family that you were the one who was obsessed with me and I had to push you away for my own safety. I read it 3 times, slowly, word by word. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would be shaking or sick. I wasn't. Because Camille had just made the biggest mistake she could make. She put the threat in writing. She typed it out, word for word, in a text with a timestamp, and sent it to my phone where it would sit forever. I screenshotted it and sent it to Tylerson with no message. He called me back in 30 seconds. Now you have everything you need, he said. Don't react. Just wait. Save every text. Build the timeline. Instead, I called Bentley. I read him the threat. He was quiet for a long beat. Then he said, I'm having a small get-together this Saturday. Family and a few friends. I want you there. And I think it's time everyone hears the real story at the same time. He wasn't inviting Camille. He was inviting Lita. He said if people had questions, it would help to have someone from Camille's own circle who could confirm the parts I couldn't prove. Saturday came warm and bright. I drove to Bentley's place feeling lighter than I had in 3 weeks. The backyard was already half full when I got there. A few of Bentley's cousins, some aunts and uncles, a couple of friends from his neighborhood. I looked across the yard and saw Lita standing near the fence with a cup in her hand. When she saw me, she gave me a small nod. No big greeting, just a nod that said, I'm here and I've got you. Tylerson was standing next to the grill with a plate in one hand and a pair of tongs in the other, even though it wasn't his grill and nobody had asked him to cook. He lifted his chin at me when I came in. For the first 45 minutes, nobody mentioned Camille. We just ate and talked and laughed. Someone told a story about a fishing trip that went wrong. One of Bentley's cousins argued about a basketball game from the night before. Then Bentley's girlfriend put her fork down and looked at me from across the table and said, I feel bad about what I said last week. I talked to Bentley about everything. I think I got played. I'm sorry. I told her it was okay. I meant it. She didn't do anything wrong. She heard a crying woman tell a sad story, and she felt bad for her. That's what normal people do. Camille counted on that. Once Bentley's girlfriend said that, it was like a door opened. One of Bentley's cousins said, wait, what actually happened? I heard something about a birthday dinner, but I don't know the details. Bentley looked at me from the end of the table and said, let him tell it. So I told it. From the barbecue to the threat text. I went slow. I didn't oversell anything. I said the names. Benny, Ada, Rosie. I said the numbers. 40 minutes the wrong direction. 23 missed calls, 3-year engagement, $620 for the bracelet. While I talked, Lita confirmed every key moment. When I mentioned the backup plan comment, Lita said she had heard it word for word, twice, once in front of 3 other girls at brunch. When I mentioned the calls Camille made to her friends after the dinner, Lita said Rosie had been one of the first people to tell Camille no. When I mentioned the text where Camille blamed Lita for twisting her words, Lita pulled out her own phone and showed the table the message she had sent me confirming what Camille had said. By the time I was done, the table was completely silent. Nobody was eating. Nobody was looking at their phone. An older woman at the far end of the table, one of Bentley's aunts, shook her head slowly and said, "That girl needs to learn that a good man isn't something you play with. They don't grow on trees." A few people nodded. Someone else said something about how people don't realize what they have until it's gone. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Camille. "I know you're at Bentley's. Lita told me. I'm on my way." I turned the screen and showed it to Tylerson. He read it and said, "Well, I guess it ends tonight." I told Bentley. He said, "This is my house. Let her come." 15 minutes later, I heard a car pull up out front. Maybe it was closer to 20. Time moves different when you're waiting for something you know is coming. People at the table had gone back to talking, but it was quieter now. Everyone knew she was on her way. The engine cut off. A door opened and closed. Camille walked around the side of the house and stepped into the backyard. She was dressed up, hair done, makeup done, wearing the same red dress from the birthday dinner. She had planned this. She knew exactly what she was going to wear and how she was going to look. Every conversation in that yard stopped at the same time. It was like someone hit a mute button. She stood at the edge of the patio and scanned the yard. Her eyes found me first, then Lita by the fence, then the long table where Bentley's family was sitting, every one of them staring at her with faces that had "we know" written all over them. She froze for half a second. I saw it. Then she put on a smile, not her real smile. She lifted one hand and said, "Hey everyone, sorry to just show up. I just really needed to talk to him." She pointed at me. Nobody said a word. Nobody waved back. Nobody smiled. The silence was so heavy you could feel it pressing against your skin. I stood up from the table, but I didn't walk toward her. I said, "Whatever you need to say, you can say it right here." Her smile flickered. She tilted her head and said, "Can we go somewhere private?" I shook my head slowly. "No. You've been telling your version of this story to everyone I know for 2 weeks. So if you have something to say it in front of the same people you tried to lie to." Her jaw tightened. She looked at Bentley's girlfriend, who looked down at the table and didn't make eye contact. She looked at Lita. Lita was still standing by the fence, arms still crossed, and she didn't move. Then Camille's composure cracked. Her voice got louder, defensive, like she was giving a speech she had rehearsed in the car on the way over. "Fine. I made mistakes, okay? I shouldn't have talked about Benny the way I did. I shouldn't have played games. But you weren't perfect either. You were suffocating me with all the gifts and the flowers and the driving. I felt pressured." I looked at her. I said, "You felt pressured? You told me to try harder. Every single time I did something for you, you told me Benny was doing more. You made me feel like nothing I did was enough, and Benny was engaged the entire time. You knew that, didn't you?" The yard went dead quiet. She didn't answer. Then Lita stepped forward 2 steps from the fence. She said, "Camille, did you know Benny had a fiancé?" Camille's head snapped toward Lita so fast I thought she was going to hurt her neck. The look in her eyes wasn't sad. It was cornered fury. She pointed at Lita and said, "You had no right to tell him anything. You were supposed to be my friend." Lita didn't take a step back. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "I am your friend. That's why I told him. Because what you were doing to him was wrong and you wouldn't listen when I said it to your face." Camille's mouth opened and closed. She turned back to me. Her voice cracked. "So that's it? You're going to throw away everything we had because of one mistake?" I looked at her. I said it quietly. The words were heavy enough on their own. "One mistake? Camille, you looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't enough. Over and over, using a man who was never even an option. You made me your backup plan, and you told your best friend about it like it was funny. That's not one mistake. That's who you chose to be." She opened her mouth. She closed it. Then she straightened her back, lifted her chin, and said, "You're going to regret this." I shook my head. "No, I'm not. I already spent months regretting that I didn't walk away sooner." She scanned the yard one more time, slowly, face to face to face, looking for one sympathetic expression. She didn't find one. Not from Bentley's aunts, not from Lita, not from Tylerson, who was standing by the grill with his arms folded, not from Bentley's girlfriend, who was still looking at the table. She turned around without saying another word. Her heels clicked against the concrete as she walked back the way she came. A few seconds later, her car door opened and closed. The engine started. The headlights swept across the yard and then swung away as she pulled onto the street. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small box with the gold bracelet inside. The ribbon was still on it. I handed it to Tylerson. He slid it into his pocket and walked over to the grill. Bentley refilled my drink. The burger on my plate had gone cold. I ate it anyway.